I'll do a short welcome and introduction about what we're doing, where we're aiming, and what the goal of this webinar is. Afterwards, we hear from Dr. Mashkour, founder of Sunglash, about the current status, and then Jean-Pascal will cover the opportunities and key discussion points from Evershed's point of view and their work in Iran. We have some time for Q&A, which will give you the opportunity to get some questions, put them in front of our presenters, and they can address them. And then we end. All in all, it will take 1 hour. The webinar is a first introduction to our renewable energy trade mission. It will be a first industry-led delegation dedicated to renewable energies going to Iran. If after this webinar the Iranian market seems to even more interesting to you, don't hesitate to reach out to discuss what you look for, and who knows, maybe our upcoming trade mission might be the perfect fit for your business. Our trade mission is a tested platform. It taps into all the key topics for the Iranian market, which we'll hear more about as well today in the webinar. It gives you the market insights and also the key context to make it there in a new and emerging market like Iran. In previous trade missions, we've proven that we can deliver the value that participants look for, and as well it's a highly regarded tool to make it in a new market. The trade mission will take place 16th to 20th of October. Program outline can be found online with a brochure of the event. It also depicts really spot on what we aim for. Solarplaza, about Solarplaza, since 2004 we've been assisting building and expanding the PV industry in an effort to accelerate the energy transition to clean and reliable green energy. Our main tools are our market insights, articles and webinars like these, and of course real life events like conferences and trade missions. We deliver these market focused events where we try to empower the businesses of participants, speakers, sponsors and supporters. Our trade missions are actually the epitome of this goal and vision, where we try to build the renewable energy market in untapped chartered areas. Now some practicalities. We have people joining from a range of professional backgrounds, though I would really like to emphasize that don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat box on the right hand side whenever one comes up. At the end we will collect them all and we give an opportunity for the presenters to answer a couple of these. You can also use this message box to ask for technical assistance. I have colleagues at my side that will assist you whenever needed. After this webinar, of course, we will share the presentation slides and also the recordings of this webinar. So without actually further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Mashkour. He's founder and director of Sunglash International Consultants. Sunglash provides legal, accounting and consulting services to foreign clients that want to operate and or invest in Iran. He has an extensive knowledge in Iranian legal entities and institutions, led the Iranian Bureau for International Legal Services, also abroad. He negotiated bilateral investment treaties as well as a variety of loan and financial facility agreements. He drafted major oil and gas supply contracts and helped construction of industrial facilities and setting up shop in Iran with foreign parties. He will provide a first outlook, current status update on the renewable energy market in Iran, and I would like to give the floor to Dr. Mashkour.
Good morning, everybody. I am very pleased to attend this webinar and to provide information to all of you, which I do hope that they will be useful. Can anybody confirm that I am online?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay, good. The presentation is about renewable energies. I will try to shift the, unfortunately okay, yes. So the presentation is about Iran's current renewables market. The first, I think, point that is to be made concern Iran's policy in this respect. The general policies are defined in Iran in 5-year development plans. Actually, we have had already 5 development plans, and the 6th development plan is in discussion before the Parliament at the present time. And in that 6th development plan, the policy of Iran is clearly stated. This is that the share of renewable energy and the number of small-scale power plants in Iran must increase. The targets that have been put forward by Iranian administration and policymakers is to reach 5,000 megawatt of electricity from renewable sources by 2021. And these sources are also defined in various documents. These are the solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, waste recycling in industrial process, and small hydropower plants. This should represent by 2021, this should represent around 5% of the country's electricity production. There is also a further indication in various texts as to the level of intended licensing or intended new capacity to be put into operation. This is about 2,000 megawatt per year. So after the having set the targets, I'm sure that you are interested in knowing what would be the financial resources to finance this new capacity. This is financed through a tax on electricity, which is presently 30 Iranian rials per kilowatt on electricity consumption, with a ceiling of 7,000 billion rials for the year, for the current year, which has commenced, Iranian year, which has commenced from March 2016 and will end 20 March 2017. So this is the amount of money that will be available this year to pay for the electricity that will be generated by operators of renewable power plants. However, I can say that at this moment we do not have such an amount of electricity produced, so there will be an excess budget for this year. The second source of electricity is the economy consumption of fossil fuels in thermal power plants, and the third financial resource would be economy in environmental costs. As you are aware, certainly Iran, like many other countries, has taken a number of commitments in the last World Environment Summit, and this is also of importance in the calculation of the financial resources that have been allocated and that will be allocated for renewable energies in Iran. The legal basis of this environment, we have a number of articles in and these provisions in various laws which provide the legal base for the activities that are undertaken in the sector of renewable energies. These are provisions in the 5-year development plan and the special law, which is the law reforming the pattern of consumption of energy of 2011, and for the implementation of these legal provisions which have been adopted by the Iranian Parliament, we have ministerial and council decrees that have been taken, in particular the Council of Ministers decrees of February 2016 and the ministerial decree, the recent ministerial decree of 8 May 2016 that has set the feed-in tariff. Who are the relevant actors? I think that this is also one of point that may be of interest to those who would like to enter into Iranian market. So first of all, the first relevant actor is of course the Ministry of Energy, which defines policies, proposes budget to the government for approval by the Parliament. Then we have the Organization for Renewable Energies, which is called SUNA, which is in charge of the implementation of the policies which have been decided by the government and the Ministry of Energy. SUNA will issue license and will conclude power purchase agreements. We have then regional electricity companies. These are important because they will issue connection permit, and these are also in charge of the operational part of the business. We have also the Organization for the Protection of the Environment, which have to approve the environmental impact report and issues environmental permits. Then one important factor is the Ministry of Agriculture, which provide land to the developers and investors as far as renewable projects, in particular in solar and wind, would need important amount of land, and such land would be available outside bigger cities. So in practical terms, investors will be in touch with the Ministry of Agriculture for the either for the lease of the agreement or to obtain a change for the use of the lands of agricultural lands to lands that can be used for production of electricity. And finally, one of the actors which is most relevant for investors is the Ministry of Finance. This is important because they will issue the investment license and the protection of the government for the foreign investment. So why Iran renewable market is attractive and why you should enter into this market? I have noted 4 reasons for that. First, a relatively high feed-in tariff to global standards. I believe that Jean-Pascal will deal with that in depth, and so I will not make any further comment on that. The potential of Iran for solar and wind energy is quite high. We have more than 300 days of clear sunny per year, and an average based on the figures that have been given by SUNA of 4.5 to 5.5 kilowatt per square meter kilowatt square meter day of energy. And also for wind energy, we have also a high coefficient that are available, especially in the eastern part of Iran. A further reason is that the market is untouched. I mean that there are very few projects that have been put into operation, and so there are many opportunities open to developers and investors. And finally, there are a number of tax incentives because of foreign investment or because of the nature of the activity which are available to developers and investors. Here I have put a map of Iran for you to familiarize with the region. Of course, the most appropriate sectors for renewable energies is the central Iran and south east and central Iran. And I have also put here a map for the wind capacities in Iran. As you will see also on the map, the brown and the yellow sectors are probably the most appropriate sectors, and so you have quite a great areas for developing wind farms in Iran, more particularly in the eastern part of Iran. The feed-in tariff, as I told you, the Ministry of Energy is responsible to determine the base tariff. The new tariffs were announced on 8 May 2016. The new tariffs have decreased somehow from those that were applicable last year, which were quite high. I can say that for the time being, for solar, for 10 megawatt projects, the rates are around 13 cents of euro per kilowatt. You have also to bear in mind that there are rumors saying that the Ministry of Energy follows a policy of a gradual decreasing of guaranteed electricity purchase price, and that in maybe next year or the year after that, we will have tenders that will be announced by the Ministry. The base tariff, I would maybe leave that to Jean-Pascal to if he wished to deal with that. Just to say that the base tariff is determined by the Ministry of Energy based on essentially three factors, and this is the average energy transformation price, the economy in decreasing of pollutants, which is the economical factor, the environmental factor indeed, and the value of fuel that will be not be used in power plants. But it is also of importance to note that the base tariff will be fixed at the time of conclusion of the PPA and will not be subject to variation thereafter. Here you have the tariffs that I just referred to. These are stated in Iranian rials, so you will see that the tariffs vary with the production capacity of the installation. The way to PPA, so how you can get a PPA. First, there is a application to SUNA for a construction license. Then once the license is issued, you and the developer will have to be in touch with different persons or entities to get other permits to acquire the land first. This can be done through the government or private lands. Then they have to get the environmental permit and the grid connection. Once these have been obtained, the PPA will be ready for signature with SUNA. This is a schematical timeline for the whole operation. So negotiation, development, extension, and the development period, which can be extended, and then the construction period, which also can be extended, and the commercial operation period, which would have a duration of 20 years, in which is also the construction period is included. So I have provided you with a summary of topics that could be of interest to you, and would be happy to answer questions that you may have in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mashkour. Yeah, we got some questions already in. Maybe it's good to go first to Jean-Pascal, his presentation, and then we can address some of these questions, because some of them might also be relevant for him, or it might be addressed by him. So I'll first go to Jean-Pascal's introduction. Jean-Pascal is a partner at Eversheds, quite a well-known global law firm, won many awards for their work on renewable energy. He heads up the energy regulatory team at Eversheds, and has vast experience in renewable energies, also advising regulators on FITs, PPAs, ESCOs, carbon reduction commitments, etc. So an expert in the field, and we're very pleased that he's here as well to present on Iran. Jean-Pascal, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Dr. Mashkour. It gives me great pleasure to be talking to you about Iran. I'm just trying to get control of the slides. Right, so as you have heard from Dr. Mashkour, Iran does present a great opportunity, not only in terms of scale, but it being a new market and also a relatively high feed-in tariff. As with new markets, there are always challenges, and these are very much concentrated in relation to the terms of the power purchase agreement itself and the availability of finance in Iran. I'll go into those in more detail later on. So as we heard some of these points were discussed by Dr. Mashkour, but on the real estate side, you as a private developer are able to obtain land privately, and there is a relatively sophisticated land registry to enable you to verify the ownership and carry out due diligence in relation to that land. And you can not only own the land, but you can have a lease, and via a conditional lease. Dr. Mashkour has gone through the permitting requirements required. In terms of grid capacity, SUNA has assured us there is sufficient grid capacity for up to 5 gigawatts. The cost of connecting to the grid will be at the developer's cost, and they will enter into a contract with the relevant grid co, and the costs will be will need to be agreed between the parties. Due to the numbers of projects that have already been issued with a license and the lack of progress thereof to date, SUNA has informed us that moving forward they're minded to only issue licenses, these are construction permits from SUNA, for smaller projects, so 10 to 20 megawatts. until the developers prove themselves, and then they'll be able to issue larger construction permits. So as Dr. Mashko explained, how SUNA and the Ministry determine the level of the FIT, it depends on what the current oil price is, environmental costs, and conversion of oil to electricity. Their intention is essentially to fix the feed-in tariff once a year, but obviously if there are substantial changes in any of the three elements, then they reserve their right to change the feed-in tariff at that time. So as experienced last year, there was a change in the feed-in tariff due to the dramatic reduction in the oil price. As Dr. Mashko explained, that the feed-in tariff is then fixed once you sign the PPA. There's no tender process as such, so you just, as a developer, you would just approach SUNA and apply for your construction permit. Now, the feed-in tariff is subject to uplift. So essentially, if you are connected to the distribution network, there is also a formula in the power purchase agreement increasing the feed-in tariff if there are changes to the euro-real exchange rate, and also there's an indexation uplift. There is also an uplift for peak supplies and an uplift relating to local content. The uplift is up to 30%, but that's subject to 100% use of local content, so then it's prorated thereafter. So we said earlier that the feed-in tariff was fixed at the date of signing the PPA. However, that is conditional on the relevant facility being built out within a certain time. So this slide shows you, for example, that with a solar project, the feed-in tariff will be fixed at the date of signing the PPA, but subject to that solar project reaching commercial operations within 15 months of signing the PPA. If the solar project does not achieve commercial operation within 15 months, then it's whatever feed-in tariff is published at the time will apply to that PPA. In terms of termination events, the termination events are relatively standard, except there's a number relating to program. And in the PPA, you'll have agreed schedule for critical dates in the program. And if the developer is late in starting construction by 3 months from the scheduled date, that is a termination event. And likewise, if it energizes by more than 6 months after scheduled date, that is a termination event, or it doesn't reach commercial operation until 9 months after the scheduled date, that is also a termination event. An additional termination event if there's no metered output for more than 6 months, that is also a termination event. So moving to one of the quite critical points in the PPA is in terms of security. Now, SUNA is the counterparty under the PPA. It is fully owned by the Ministry, but in terms of security, what the PPA proposes is that there is a 6-month revolving letter of credit issued by an Iranian bank. The first 6 months is at the cost of SUNA, but any extensions thereof for the term of the PPA are at the cost of the developer. So obviously that is quite an unusual provision. So not only is the cost of that letter of credit an issue, but also the fact that if the letter of credit is not renewed, then the developer is completely exposed because all it can do is bring a claim under the PPA, but there's nothing backing up that claim in terms of security at that point in time. So this is one of the big issues we have raised with SUNA And at our conference in May, the Deputy Minister of Finance did suggest that a government guarantee would also be available. And we have also heard through the industry that an alternative may be that there'll be a central bank guarantee available. We're waiting to hear clarification on those guarantees. Another critical element that we would look out for in PPAs is whether it is what we would call a take-or-pay obligation, namely whether Suna is obliged to pay for all the metered output regardless of what happens on the grid and regardless of whether they require the electricity or not. The good news is that under this PPA it is a take-or-pay obligation, and Suna is also obliged to pay an equivalent to the amount that would have been produced if there are delays on the grid in terms of connection or where there are outages as well. In terms of compensatory events, so this is giving the developer the ability to change the feed-in tariff or seek compensation in certain circumstances. There are provisions dealing with changes in law. So if there are changes in law which relate to increased costs, then there is the ability to seek compensation under the power purchase agreement. However, in relation to what we would call political force majeure events, so those are things like wars, acts of terrorism, unexploded munitions, archaeological finds, sanctions, embargoes. So in terms of which party is regarded to be the most in control of those events or offers value for money, we would normally seek the government, or in this case Suna, to take responsibility for those events, notwithstanding they are arguably outside their control. But we would be seeking, and it'd be a key bankability issue, that Suna would offer compensation in relation to those types of events. Unfortunately, under this PPA, Suna is not offering compensation. It is offering to extend the term of the PPA in the event of these events, which does help, but it doesn't help in terms of cash flow issues and the payment of the debt during the occurrence of one of these events. In terms of dispute resolution, the proposed structure is that there is a panel. In the case of dispute, the dispute will be referred to a panel of experts and then right of appeal to the Iranian courts. This is all subject to Iranian law. Now, we see it quite standard that a local law will apply. The issue is the dispute resolution process, as we've seen in other markets, for example in Egypt. The development banks especially would wish to have a neutral either location or neutral arbitration rules applying. So in terms of the PPA itself, we're very happy to share a summary of the PPA along the lines we've just presented. And if people wish to provide comments, then what we are doing is, as we've done in other markets, is coordinating everyone's comments, and then our intention is to have negotiation meetings with Suna to try and convert or trying to improve the terms of the PPA. Suna have said they are open to such an approach, and so if you do wish to submit comments, please do so, and we can take it forward. In terms of how to structure the SPV and the corporate structures, the shareholdings relating to that SPV, we would suggest that you look at very closely the bilateral investment treaty available, which will be linked to where the shareholders are based. So depending on where the shareholders are based or where there's investment contribution into the project will depend on which bilateral investment treaty applies. The advantage of bilateral investment treaty, it will offer protection in terms of expropriation of the assets or non-payment by SUNA or the Iranian government. There's obviously also tax issues to be looked at in terms of the tax treaties between Iran and the relevant country of the shareholders. As Dr. Mashkour stated earlier, that essentially as a condition to obtaining BIT protection is that you obtain a FIPA license. So lastly, I'd just like to close on the fact that I hinted at the start of the presentation that one of the challenges is financing. Essentially, there is limited finance available. In terms of the local banks, they have very limited experience in terms of project finance. On the international side, whilst a number of banks have said they are interested, as yet there's been limited engagement. I think there's an element of everyone's waiting to see what happens, including in relation to the presidential elections. Having said that, the Chinese banks are definitely involved. We're seeing the export credit agencies being involved, and banks are slowly but surely getting more and more involved in the or showing more and more interest in the Iranian market. And that ends my presentation. If I can hand over back to Rick, I think Dr. Mashkour and myself will be very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jean-Pascal. It was very insightful. A lot is happening. Still a lot has to be done as well. So it's great that you made that clear, and where some challenges are, but also where the opportunities are. There are, of course, quite some questions from the audience. It's everybody, yeah. As mentioned, there's a lot of interest into the market, so there's also a lot that still is a bit unclear to some people. I think Dr. Mashkour and Jean-Pascal, some questions can actually be addressed, I think, by both of you. But maybe the first one is more towards Dr. Mashkour. As you mentioned, there have been 5 development plans and 6 is under discussion at the moment with the stated goals on renewable energy. What could be changed to these targets that you set from 5,000 megawatts in 2021?
Of course, I cannot predict what will happen in the discussion before the Parliament. These discussions will begin shortly, and I think that the 6th plan will be adopted sometime in September. But I would say that I would assume that the Parliament would confirm this target, considering that in fact a number of licenses have been issued, but actually we have only 0.5 megawatt in production. So I believe that the 6th plan would confirm the target that is proposed by the government.
Exactly. So it is a real motivation for the country, and we visited Iran as well, and it's quite clear that there's also a strong push from the environmental impact for renewables. So it's quite promising that they will stick to this 5,000 megawatts. Another question concerns the regional electricity companies. Are they private or are they state-owned? Maybe this one is for Dr. Mashkour.
They are under the control of the Ministry of Energy.
And as Suna wants to be the single point of contact, do these are they going to deal with these regional electricity companies, or will the developer do that directly when it
Yeah,
concerns grid connection?
it's for the developer to do that.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
to
Yeah. So
contact
just to add,
the company which is where the land is located.
Yeah.
yeah. So the
Jean-Pascal, you have
developer
something?
would negotiate directly with the grid company. As I said earlier, the grid company is the one that would set the cost of the connection. However, those costs of connection would be subject to the approval of the Ministry of Energy.
Okay. Okay, that's quite clear. So that's also work that developer has to work on, has to deliver upon, also to meet these targets that are set in the guidelines, the timeline of Suna for the construction phase.
Yes.
Another question for solar and also for wind goes the same thing. Is land likely to be private or state-owned? As Dr. Mashkour explained, Ministry of Agriculture can work with land leasing, but could it also be done via private land?
Yes, of course, it can be done from private owners, and we know that in smaller projects, private landowners have entered into a lease with the developer. But usually, as the requirement for the lands are quite important, so these have to be found on public lands, on lands controlled by the Ministry of Agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And as developers move forward and they set up, for example, partnerships or an SPV, can the profits be exported easily from Iran, for example, to the EU? What are the regulations and the limitation on that? I think both of you can supply some info on that.
I would say that once you have obtained the FIPA license, which is the investment license, you can the central bank must provide you with the required foreign currency needed so to convert your Iranian rials into foreign currency and so to transfer it out of Iran. That's a direct consequence and an advantage of obtaining the investment license.
Yeah. Jean-Pascal, are there still limitations in place for moving money outside to outside countries, if, for example?
No, as Dr. Mashkour said, that that's the critical thing of obtaining the FIPA license, and the FIPA license is what gives you the right to withdraw the monies. The only question is convertibility of the reals into euros or dollars, as it were. So that would be one of the challenges. Having said that, we have asked local players, and they've said there are sufficient foreign reserves in Iran due to the sales of oil to enable the reals to be converted.
Exactly. And if this would be converted then internally, then there was another question on it, like could the PPA price be hedged against, for example, the euro or any?
Yes, there is currently a formula in the PPA which is pegged against the euro. The way that formula works is that to a limited extent the developer chooses how much of any increase in the feed-in tariff is linked to indexation and how much is linked to exchange rate changes.
Okay, okay, that's good information. And is there already an international or local insurance or bankable insurance solution available to cover the mentioned PPA risk that any of you is aware of? Could that be already in place? Is there already something available?
I know there are already discussions ongoing. Said the export credit agencies have said they're willing to participate. Said there are, and I know people who who are looking at the different insurance instruments available. So those discussions are already ongoing, and if anyone wants to find out more, if they contact me, then I can put them in touch with the relevant insurance brokers who are looking into this.
Also on this side, the market is really moving towards answering needs or actually opportunities in the market at the moment. And probably this relates also to this question. Is Suna open with energy in this regard to discuss offshore arbitration? Might it come to that?
This is something that can be raised with Suna, but I believe that they will have a legal problem with that, because there is a constitutional provision in Iran which provides that referral of disputes relating to public properties would require the approval of the Iranian Parliament and of the Iranian Council of Ministers and of the Iranian Parliament. So an arbitration clause in the PPA would be valid only if approved.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question came in. This probably is direct to Dr. Mashkour. Could you please give an update on the current legislative and visa process? Is it easy for foreigners, be it contractors or consultants, to work in Iran? Is it also in this regard opening up?
Yes, of course. I mean, in Iran there was no problem from the Iranian side for foreigners to come in. Some foreign countries have issued warnings to their nationals not to come to Iran. But that warnings have so been taken out for many of them, and so there are quite a number of foreign visitors to Iran. Visas can be obtained easily from Iranian embassies outside Iran or from a great number of countries. I think for more than 60 countries, visas can be obtained directly at the airport. And you can check the list of these countries at the site of the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, visa, or on the website of the various Iranian embassies.
Yeah.
We will just maybe.
And then, but I have to add that this is for visas to visit Iran, but then to work in Iran, of course, a foreigner has no cannot work in Iran unless he obtains a work permit. And work permit should be requested from the Ministry of Labor. It can be rather easily issued for management positions in investment for investors, and it would take I would say a few weeks for the issuance of the work permit with the recommendation of the investment authority for those who have obtained a FIPA license. So the FIPA license would also assist in obtaining work permit for management positions.
And can I just add, obviously that's on the Iranian side, as Dr. Mashkour said, care must be taken that some of the US sanctions are still in place, so there are still restrictions on the US side in terms of American companies or American directors being involved in projects in Iran. So you can structure ways to ensure that you don't fall foul of the sanctions, but great care has got to be taken in that respect.
Yeah, that's a good note. We can vouch, actually, me and my colleagues, when we visited Iran, the visa isn't an issue, but of course there are some countries that have limitations. I'll make sure we also add that to our website under the info. it's quite valid information and a good question. Maybe another question also relates to Suna again. Also with a bit briefly touched upon by Jean-Pascal with the maximum licenses and also the size. Would Suna rather support smaller scale projects up megawatts, or will they in the end favor the large scale projects in excess well over 10 megawatts?
I think this is going, what they've told us is that they're favoring at the moving forward 10 to 20 megawatt projects, purely, as I said, because they're receiving increased pressure from the Ministry of Energy and others that there aren't sufficient projects being developed, and they think that's partly because people are overexposing themselves. So their intention is to, moving forward, is to only issue one license per developer, and for a 10 to 20, well, they've said a small project which they've said is up to 20 megawatts. Now that is purely a policy declaration they've made. Obviously, that will be a concern for a number of developers. I should say it doesn't affect existing licenses, but I think we'll hope that moving forward, potentially as more projects get developed, Suna will become more relaxed in that respect.
Okay. I have maybe two more questions, and I think then we reach the 1 hour mark. Are there any major developments on the transmission and distribution infrastructure that you're aware of? I know from our side that Iran is trying to implement power pools with neighboring countries, but are there any updates or infrastructure workings in the pipeline that can potentially open up even more opportunities for renewable energy in the country? Are you aware of any, Dr. Mashkour?
I am not directly aware of any specific project of that, but I am aware that Tavanir, which is the authority which is in charge of the Iranian grid, has plans to improve the quality and the extent of the Iranian grid capacity. We need in Iran overall, I believe, around 5,000 megawatt per year of new capacity. So everybody in the energy sector is working to meet that requirement.
If I can just add, I think they've told us they're doing a study to determine their long-term plan, i.e. beyond the 5 years. You're right, Rick, in that there are definitely interconnectors in place, so that is an opportunity. Having said that, a developer themselves can't export the electricity. They can sell it privately, but they can't export the electricity out of the country. That's for Suna and Tavanir to implement any exports via interconnectors.
Okay. So that's yeah. In the end, that's not directly related to the developer, but that's also maybe taps a bit on the take-or-pay mechanism. That if they take the energy, then in the end it could be exported to other countries in the region. This is also on the internal market more. Is there actually a growth in the awareness for the need for renewable energies in Iran? Like, are lobbyists or NGOs actually trying to, let's say, propel this green energy transition that could also hit ground in Iran?
Yes, there is an awareness of the for renewable energies here, and we hear a lot in the media on the necessity to develop this sector, and the population is also more interested in the possibilities of development. And quite a number of Iranian local companies, service companies, engineering companies, and developers, and also investors that are interested into this sector. And a few days ago, the first contacts were made with the Iranian stock exchange market for the constitution of energy funds specialized in renewable energies.
So it is also internally a growing market. Do you also see more and more local parties, be it in distributed generation, so for example industries that want to have solar panels on their roof or office buildings? Is it the more and more seen in the country itself?
Yes, it's seen more and more. For example, I think that for public electricity in the city, for lights, traffic lights, for telephones along the roads, and so for all of these devices, so there are more and more use of electricity, of solar electricity. And also we are seeing the development of the roof production electricity also.
Yeah, I think we hit our time. We have more questions, but we will abstract these all and collide this input and try to answer them. There are more questions about setting up companies in Iran, on timescales for that, about the convertibility of the Iranian rial, and a lot more also on the investment side. But we will compile all of these, and then with our presenters of today, we'll try to address them maybe in a separate white paper. There's a lot of input. I think a lot of questions, and we hope to address these in the coming months. Also to open up the opportunity for this renewable energy trade mission. Yeah. For now, I'd like to thank our presenters, Dr. Mashkour and Jean-Pascal Boutin, for your time, for your insights. We will work more and closer together in the upcoming months towards October, and then also in October we'll do, at the end of the trade mission, an Iranian conference, so hopefully we also see the local parties that are joining us today there in Tehran. Now I'd like to thank you for your attention, and hope to be in touch.